on his way. Devil is on his way. Devil is on his way, motherfucker. The devil gonna make you pay. Fall to your knees. Devil is on his way. Fall to your knees. Devil gonna make you pay. Fall to your knees. Devil is on his way. Motherfucker, he's on his...
Mountain Murders is an Appalachian true crime podcast. Listener discretion is advised. The show contains graphic language and depictions of violence. It may not be suitable for all audiences.
We say fuck a lot.
Hey, y'all. Welcome back to a very wet Mountain Murders. I'm Heather.
And I'm Dylan.
And I say wet because Hurricane Elsa seems to be blasting the mid-Atlantic heading up to the northeast.
Is that what's going on?
Yeah, we've got like a torrential, I can't say that. Rains and thunderstorm.
Is it a deluge?
It's something.
It's a deluge.
It's like a fucking monsoon.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems to be intensifying.
There's thunder and lightning.
Oh, man, I was just sitting on the couch thinking about how much I enjoy a nice thunderstorm when you're like, don't have to go anywhere and you're just cuddled up on the couch.
Just chilling at home.
Yeah, you got a good movie, maybe some popcorn.
Some comfy pants that are stretchy.
Yeah, always.
I know, I feel like all of my pants are comfy pants at this point.
Well, I think a lot of people have that same affliction.
You think so?
Yeah, I believe so.
I have a bit of true crime news here, Dylan, that is just so fucking bizarre. We have to talk about it. It's disturbing.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people talking about this one.
The Durango Police Department arrested Jonah Barrett Lesko, age 26, on Monday for alleged sexual acts with a horse at the La Plata County Fairgrounds.
So he is not only having sex with a horse, which we've heard that's happened before, he's doing it out in the public.
Oh, yeah. So police responded to the fairgrounds about 10 p.m. on the 17th of June because they received a report that this man was having intercourse with a horse. He was identified and detained. They charged him with trespassing as well. They recovered some text messages where he admitted his sexual interaction with the horse. And during interviews, he also admitted, yeah, I did this. So he has been in the Durango area since about 2019. And right now he's facing charges of animal cruelty, which is a Class 1 misdemeanor, and possession of burglary tools, which is a Class 5 felony. So the burglary tools carry more time than fucking a horse.
He was trying to break into that horse's heart.
Oh my gosh. So the incident was first reported, Dylan, by the horse's caretaker who had video surveillance inside the stall and watched a live video feed of the incident like on their mobile phone.
So it's not even his horse.
No!
It's just some random horse in a stall at the fairgrounds.
At a fairgrounds. And the family that cares for this horse declined to comment to press. He fled the area on foot when officers arrived, but he did leave behind an Osprey backpack. Those are really nice.
Osprey?
Yeah.
Oh.
And a purple mountain bike. And all of that was shared on social media. At least 4 people contacted police and stated that this guy Lesko matched the physical description of the suspect and had that specific backpack and bicycle. So on Monday, he admitted that he left his backpack and bicycle behind when he saw the approaching headlights. They found all of those burglary tools, including a grinder and bolt cutters, inside the backpack. And he said that those were used to make knives and swords.
Oh, so it sounds like this is after hours at the fair.
It's 10 p.m.
Maybe everything's kind of closed down for the evening. People wrapping up, got the animals bedded down that are there. And so he decided to break in, essentially. And, well, here's the thing we haven't established. Did he have consent from the horse?
Well, Jonah says that the horse had given him indications, and based on its behavior, that he felt the horse wanted to participate in some sexual activity. And he says he never engaged in sexual behavior with an animal before this incident.
I don't believe that.
But I guess this horse was just fucking him across the field. I mean, this is just so fucking weird.
It's just too much.
It's a little too much, yeah.
He was not taking nay for an answer, huh? Hey, that was good.
Oh, yeah. He was like, good. Hey, you want to roll in the hay? And the horse was like, nay. Well, he was booked into the county jail. His bail was set at $5,000. And it sounds like this guy may be homeless because he was at a homeless, like a designated campsite that is kind of known like for the homeless. He was there bragging about this incident, like that what he had done and had gotten away with before he was arrested.
Ha! I guess other people be like, well, the joke's on you. You didn't get away with it.
No.
But how's he got this nice backpack and mountain bike?
I don't know. Maybe he's one of those trust fund hippie types. We
Well-
have those homeless folks around Asheville that are fake homeless.
That's true.
They're like the crust punks.
Well, maybe he stole it because it sounds like he may be a thief as well.
Maybe, but he looks crazy, and we can post a photo of him online if you want. Maybe we'll post it on Instagram. He looks crazy. He's got crazy eyes. He looks like he's probably on drugs.
Let me see the dude.
He looks like he may or may not be on meth. He's got that meth face. You know the face.
Yeah, this guy's got issues. That's what that face says.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm making light of it. Obviously, we're going to make fun of someone who, but what he did was really weird.
Horrific. I cannot imagine viewing something like that, being a witness to this.
And let's be honest, an animal cannot give you consent, even if they've been flirting with you all day.
It's a horse.
And it is not right what he did on many levels.
No, it's very disturbing.
I don't know. Do we consider bestiality or any of that a kink, and we let someone do it?
No,
Or-
I mean, bestiality has to be some kind of mental, I don't know if that's considered like some sort of mental disorder, but as people would say back home, that boy ain't right.
Well, yeah. I guess considering the fact that an animal can't give you any kind of reasonable consent, obviously they can't communicate with you like that. That we are not going to be able to classify this as a kink.
No, well, at least the lady who was having sex with the dead pirate ghost a few years back, I mean, at least she wasn't like hurting anyone physically by having sex with the ghost pirate.
God, I don't think I remember that one.
Oh,
but-
well, I'll have to refresh your memory.
Oh my God, stop.
Will you stop with your computer?
won't stop.
Well, you don't even need it.
I'm
oh
looking
my
at-
gosh.
I'm looking
so,
at our
announcement. I'm going to change the subject because you're pissing me off with your computer. There's a live show. That's right. Mountain Murders is back. We are doing a live show September the 24th at 6:30 p.m. at the Lazy Hiker in Sylva, North Carolina. We're going to have food, drinks. The beer is amazing from the Lazy Hiker. The food is super good. You guys are going to love it. We are going to have a ticket link available on Tuesday, July the 10th. So coming up very soon, you will be able to pre-purchase tickets for this event. Of course, we will have, if it doesn't sell out, we will have tickets available at the door. More information headed your way about that. But again, our first live show since COVID. We're going to be back on stage. I'm excited, Dylan. How about you?
Oh man, I can't wait.
We've been dying to do this.
We did our first live show right before the pandemic, literally like in that May, right?
No, the pandemic hit in March or February, March, and we did our show in January. So it was right on the cusp.
So it was right there, literally weeks before all the COVID broke, and it was so much fun.
Sold out.
It sold
Great
out.
crowd.
We had an incredible time, and we were really looking forward to doing more. And then obviously we couldn't. So now here we are, year or so later, and we're able to get back to it, and we can't wait because we love the opportunity to not only entertain, but meet our fans and listeners in person.
Yeah, we're getting a little lengthy here, so I'm going to wrap it up before we get into our case. Thanking our brand new patrons, Nicole and Candy. They joined us at patreon.com/Mountain Murders Podcast. Nicole is a local, so she's in the area and does some like remodeling work, right, Dylan?
Yeah. It sounds like that's what she does for a living there, and she has actually suggested some incredible cases that were on the radar, but we may bump them up the list.
Yeah, no shit. And she listens while she's working, and we always appreciate that. We know we have a lot of listeners who tune in while they're at work, so we're happy to help you pass the time because we know that most of you fucking hate work.
Work sucks.
And again, if you want to join us at patreon.com, check us out. We have all sorts of tiers that meet everyone's financial, ability. So you don't have to sign up at the top tier. We have, even for $1, you can support the show and still get access to some cool stuff. And we also have a 2-part series on the Colonial Parkway killings
Oh, wow.
on there. It's going to be great. We've also joined the Podbreed Network. Of course, you can find us wherever you download, but we are part of the Podbreed Network now, which is very cool. If you're looking for more podcasts, check out Podbreed. Lots of cool indie do-it-yourself podcasters out there. And of course, radiofreeasheville.com, streaming there now with Mountain Murders, along with a lot of other Asheville-based podcasts. So again, if you're looking for more content, want to get turned on to something new, check out Radio Free Asheville. Dylan, this case is huge that we're getting into. This is going to be a lengthy episode.
Yeah, I think people already figured that out.
So grab your waters, your beer, your earbuds, whatever you got to do to sit down and get ready, because this case not only is going to be a lengthy one, but it's a doozy.
Yes, this is one of, I guess you would consider one of the bigger cases. And actually, I'd never dug into it personally, and I don't know why. And because what I have researching for this show, it's an insane story.
It really is. And I think initially I was a little reticent for us to cover this particular guy, though I've had several folks reach out and say, hey, when are you going to cover Israel Keys? You already know who we're covering today. And at first I was like, because I always thought of him as being kind of a doober, but folks wanted to hear it. Once I started researching the case, getting into it, I was blown away. It's truly a frightening type of serial killer, Israel Keys. Very frightening type of serial killer.
Yeah, he's a full-blown monster, and he did this for years.
And he does have a connection to Appalachia. He did live in Maine. He had a house in New York and spent some time in Vermont. So I feel like, it's enough of a connection that we can discuss him. You ready?
Let's dig into Israel Key.
Israel Keys was born in the small town of Cove, Utah on January 7th of 1978 into a large Mormon family. Israel had many sisters. He was actually one of 10 children born to his parents who were incredibly religious.
Yeah, I think you could actually say they're to the point of being fanatical.
Yes.
Or a zealot. Yeah,
I think that's a great way to describe them.
This goes way beyond I'm spiritual, I go to church every week, or have strong beliefs. This is like literally taking your beliefs and applying it to every single waking moment of your life, and not daring to veer outside of what your beliefs say.
I'm sorry, I just dropped my pen.
Oh my God, what's going on? Well, since you're doing that, I got to fix this mic.
Well, America was his oldest sister. She was born first in 1976, and then Israel followed 2 years later. So he was like the second child born of 10. That just blows my mind that people still, like in the last 30 or 40 years, would have 10 kids.
I don't. That's a lot of kids.
That's a lot of kids.
I had 3 kids, not personally, but I was around them, and that was a lot.
And you raised them.
Yeah.
Sort of.
Yeah, well, I did raise them, damn it.
If we want to call it that.
Yeah, and I kept them alive until they were able to not kill themselves.
Just raised them wild like squirrels.
That's how we raise human children nowadays. You're trying to stop them from committing suicide the entire time.
And just teach them how to collect nuts.
Yeah. But no, just
their nest.
3 kids is a lot. So I just can't even contemplate adding 7 more kids on top of that.
Yeah, at that point, it's like they're probably just raising each other, which is basically what happened in this situation. So Keys was homeschooled by his parents, John and Heidi. Heidi and John had met in high school in Los Angeles, and their connection was that they both were considered misfits. Heidi was a loner who'd been adopted by an older couple, and they had been together like 17 years before she came along. They didn't have a lot of luck having children, so after 17 years of marriage, they decided to adopt. And Jeff was a loner like Heidi, and he spent most of his free time with his family or learning to fix things. He was very handy. Both were Mormons. Heidi was 21, and Jeff was 22 when they got married. Heidi was a Girl Scout of 11 years, and Jeff had done missionary work in Germany. They wanted nothing more than to raise their children in nature, so they decided to move to Utah. They ended up in Richmond, outside of the Cove area, and that was a small town with a population of about 2,000 people, and it's known for its Pepperidge Farm Factory.
Ooh.
I think they make goldfish crackers there.
I
think so.
Oh my God, could you imagine smelling goldfish in there?
No.
It's a favorite snack.
They're pretty good.
I love them. Extra cheddar.
It is also a town steeped in Mormon faith, with the LDS Church being a focal point. Napoleon Dynamite was actually partially filmed in this town. So if you need a view of that rural community, just watch Napoleon Dynamite, and that is basically where they lived, in that town,
Oh, that's pretty cool.
where there's not a lot.
No, so it's kind of spread out. You'd have homes right next to a big field, stuff like that.
Yeah. Like,
Okay.
eat your lard, Tina, you fat
Eat it.
ham, whatever he says.
So-
Israel's parents tried to shelter their kids from the secular world. When he was small, very small child, his parents decided to convert from Mormonism to a more radical form of Christianity that some would describe as militia-like.
Yeah, what is it? The Christian Identity Group?
Yeah, we'll get into that further.
Yeah, yeah. This is where I guess at first, when you said Mormon, some people might be like, well, it's not that extreme, and it's not. There might be certain branches and people, which that's in every group. You have the people that take it way too far, but this other branch of Christianity is every time I've ever heard it brought up is people are super extreme.
Yeah, like Southern Poverty Law Center has them listed basically as like a domestic terrorist group. It's like not a good scene.
Yes.
And that's how Israel described it, as well as militia-like. Jeff hated hospitals and modern medicine, so all of the kids were born at home. None of the children had birth certificates or social security cards, and they, of course, didn't believe in vaccines for their kids.
Okay.
The Keyes family moved from Utah to Colville, Washington, after some neighbors reported the strange behavior of the Keyes family because they had these two toddlers and they were rarely seen outside. And neighbors were concerned, plus just some other strange things that were happening in and around this household,
So the two youngest kids were rarely ever seen at all.
which would be America and Israel when they were toddlers. And people just thought it was really weird that these kids were never outside, and then the family itself just seemed very odd. So someone decided to report them to like Child Protective Services. So this really pissed off Jeff and Heidi. They packed up and moved further off the grid so that they didn't have nosy, like prying neighbors. In Colville, the family lived a rugged, off-the-grid life in a one-room cabin, if you can even call it that. It was kind of like a lean-to shelter.
Wow. I mean, just you're already off the grid, and then you go further off the grid, which is pretty wild. But I mean, just at what point? I appreciate people that take chances and believe in themselves and all that stuff, but at what point are you like, am I putting my family in a kind of precarious situation?
Well, this almost reminds me of that film with Viggo Mortensen, Captain Fantastic, where they live off the grid and don't really have a house, kind of live in a shack.
Yeah, that's a pretty wild movie.
So this cabin, we're calling it, didn't have running water or electricity. It was on 160 acres that the couple paid cash for. They lived off the land. Jeff worked as an appliance repairman. While he built this family home, he was chopping down trees, and, it took a lot of time because he was doing it all by himself and trying to maintain a job where he could earn a little bit of money. The Keyes family attended churches who were deeply involved in the white supremacist Christian identity movement, as you mentioned, Dylan. Christian identity movement, if you are not familiar, was born in the 1980s. If you remember our Eric Rudolph episode, his mother was involved, and they had actually lived on a compound. I believe it was in Missouri for a while
Yeah,
when he was a teenager.
it seems to have flourished in the middle of the country along with some other, kind of, and this always has the Christian Identity group, or however you say it, always has this militia extremist element to it. Seems like.
Well, their belief is that white Christians, not Jewish folks, are true Israelites favored by God. The movement has attracted new neo-Confederate hate groups and like other white power groups. So probably not anybody we'd want to ever associate with. So Heidi and Jeff loved their children, but also saw them as free labor. They had few friends, the children, but mostly cats and dogs for friends. So the kids didn't really have anyone else to play with but each other. They had no television, no radio, no computer, or really any kind of contact with the outside world. And not only did they live in extreme poverty, but any pleasures of childhood that you think of, like watching cartoons or eating sugary cereals, were denied.
Damn.
These kids were forced instead to memorize scripture. They wore used hand-me-down clothing, all secondhand, and sometimes they wore shoes that were too small. Israel's toes were disfigured because of wearing shoes that didn't fit for most of his life.
See, I don't understand why you're in this situation. It's like you're not properly providing for your children. And it's fine to say we don't need a TV, radio, things like that, or a bunch of snacks, as long as they're fed and happy. But this doesn't sound like that happy of an environment at all. It doesn't sound fun.
No, it doesn't sound fun. And from my research, I don't feel like this was a family that really ever had fun.
Yeah.
It just seemed like everything was just hard labor.
God, what is it? The
hard life.
1801?
Well, I think even in the 1800s, kids probably had shoes that fit. Somebody sold a hog and bought them some shoes, right?
It's true.
Well, the kids chopped firewood. They tended to animals and to each other. Israel, being the oldest son, was a leader among the siblings. He became man of the house when his dad was away, and it seems like his father was away quite a bit. And from what I understand, Jeff was not a very hands-on kind of dad. Like, it seems like Jeff really was, like, almost neglectful.
Yeah.
Just, like, really checked out from the kids, from parenting, and Heidi was kind of left running the household with all these kids, but yet she wasn't 100% in it either.
Well, if this is the way you feel, and that's okay, to feel that way, why you keep having kids?
Yeah, I know.
I mean, you're adding more and more pressure on top of this situation already, and it's not like you have this, huge home without, and all these resources to take care of the children. It's like every extra kid would make it, that much tougher.
You would think. Well, Israel learned to cook at an early age, clean the house, sew. He braided his sister's hair, and they were all crazy about him. Like, his siblings all really looked up to Israel. They loved him. They thought he was a great big brother. And he was great to his siblings. Like, he was really kind and caring with them. Every 2 years, a baby would come along in the family. The cabin was crowded. In fact, the kids had to live outside in a tent from April to November.
Damn, man.
They grew their own food and hunted game. They never saw a doctor or a dentist. And Heidi treated the children with herbs and oils. So, holistic medicine, never going to a doctor, never going to a dentist.
So
just completely cut off from society.
Basically, they don't believe in modern medicine.
No, not at all.
So we're not going to use any medicine. We're not going to get any type of treatments. If at all possible, we're going to handle it in-house, no matter what it is.
Yeah, and from what I read, like, Mom was a big believer in here, just drink some peppermint tea, you'll feel better kind of thing, and take a hot bath. Just some really simple home remedies. So even if the kids had a broken arm, it was like tough shit.
Go stand out in the cold. Get out of your tent. Stand out in the cold. It'll make it numb, and then you won't feel the pain.
Pretty much. Can you imagine living in a tent for like 8 months out of the year?
No, and I'm going to assume in that they don't have everything they need to live out of a tent, right? I mean, they probably just got like some blankets on the damn ground.
Well, even in
or something.
November, October, can you imagine Washington, Pacific Northwest weather?
No.
It just sounds miserable.
Yes.
Or we're very spoiled. I don't know. Well, when the family joined the Christian Identity Church, Israel befriended two brothers who lived a half-mile away. Chevy and Shane Kehoe were close to Israel's age. And like the Keys family, the Kehoe family, they were a large family who lived off the grid. They homeschooled their children. Their father was planning for a race war. And the Kehoes knew all about guns, shooting, hiding them, cleaning them, and stealing them.
So their neighbors are essentially like, they're similar interests.
Yes.
So it's off the grid. Some big calamity is going to happen. We don't want any connection with the modern world. And it's like, hey, Jim, what are you doing today? I'm preparing for a race war.
Yep.
I mean, what the fuck, dude?
Well, Israel had always been interested in guns, so this was very exciting, like hanging out with the Kehoe family. He began learning all about guns with the Kehoe brothers, teaching him like everything he needed to know about guns. Israel Keyes was a delinquent teenager who began breaking into neighbors' homes and stealing their guns. He loved hunting, and Keyes also wanted to pursue anything with a heartbeat. That's what he said. And he would often torture animals.
Okay.
Yeah. He would later say at 14, he knew his interests and behaviors were not quote unquote normal, as they were not what other people were interested in. And I guess when he would share his thoughts and feelings, people would give him a look like, huh?
Well, yeah, I think a lot of times you don't realize, you don't know what normal is until other people tell you what you're doing isn't normal, right? I mean, you
Yeah.
just think, you hear kids growing up in very strange, abusive environments, but they just think that's how people are. They think that's how life goes until they get outside of that environment and then realize, no, it was weird that I lived out in a tent multiple months out of a year, or basically raising my kid brothers and sisters
Exactly.
because my parents don't want to be that involved.
Well, let's pause for a moment, take a quick break, and we'll be right back. Wow, Dylan, while we were on that break, I noticed a yacht floating by out in the river that started in our yard
Well, that's not a good sign.
because of the rain.
Were there any hot chicks on it?
Yeah, leopard print bathing suits, like Duran Duran was blasting. I saw like bottles of champagne popping.
What? They're popping. They got bottle service?
It looked like Rico Suave was up there in a Speedo.
Was Jason Momoa driving this yacht?
No, but I'm still waiting. I'm thinking he might surf by.
Well, I was going to say, I know he wasn't on the yacht, or you would not have come back
I would not have returned.
and have a partially completed episode of Mountain Murders
Yeah.
that I don't know how to upload.
Okay, well, let's get back to our story. We were discussing Israel saying that he, didn't feel like he had normal thoughts, feelings, and interests. So he starts studying Satanism and rejecting his family's beliefs, which I think is natural. You get into your teenage years, you do reject a lot of what your parents are pushing on you. And I think with his parents being so fanatical about religion, it's not surprising that he rejected that. But it also just seems like Israel Keyes is the kind of guy who spends his whole life like just trying to be rebellious or something.
Well, it wouldn't surprise me. He was the oldest, right?
He was the second oldest,
Second
but
oldest.
the oldest boy in the family.
The second oldest, him and his sister, the oldest of 10 kids. So they've been dealing with all this longer than
for a
the
long
rest.
time.
So it doesn't surprise me at all. There's some underlying resentment, even if you don't know why you resent your parents. And I'm going to say it's more than just the religion, but just because that religion, their beliefs led to all the environment, the housing issues, the rather extreme poverty. So it doesn't surprise me as soon as he could that he would want to reject some of these notions his parents have.
The guns he stole were unloaded at pawn shops or on the black market through the Kehoe family. It was easy at this time because nobody ever asked Israel for an ID or anything like that. And he's like a 14-year-old kid stealing guns and selling them.
Pawning them at a pawn shop.
Yeah. The 90s, such a different time. Israel had a particularly close relationship with his younger sister, Charity. The pair would often go shooting in the woods together. They started fires, they stole people's property, and sometimes scared animals together.
Just having fun.
Just some normal kid shit, right? One day, he grabbed his sister's cat, which he said had been getting into the trash. Now, this is a disturbing story. If you don't want to hear about animal abuse, you might want to skip ahead. I'll give you a second. Okay. So he took pieces of parachute cord and tied the cat to a tree, and the cord was about 10 feet long. He wrapped the other end around the cat's neck, and then he shoots the cat and watches it run around the tree in circles, and the cat eventually vomits because it's like shot and it's choking itself, right? And Israel laughs and thinks this is the funniest shit he's ever seen.
Yeah, I just don't get people who want to hurt little animals.
Well, he did this in front of a friend, and after that, the friend never wanted to hang out with him again. And I can see why.
Well, it's just sadistic. Even if you're not a bubbly, super nice person, most people are going to think that is wrong or that's just weird.
Well, there's so many layers to this being wrong. I mean, first and foremost, you're like, what kind of person tortures an animal like this? But then the second part of that is, this is your sister's cat, and you're supposed to love your siblings and take care of them, but you're going to purposefully do this to your sister's cat, knowing it's probably going to cause her great emotional harm as well. I mean, there's
Yeah.
just so much about it that's fucked up.
Well, it's true. I'm not surprised his friend didn't want to kick it anymore.
Yeah. Well, Israel was essentially the textbook sadist psychopath, even as a child. It is practiced to start on animals, and then that eventually leads to killing humans. And we've seen that time and time again when it comes to serial killers. What do we call that? The McDowell triad?
Well, yeah,
The
you're talking about the
arson,
fire.
the bedwetting, torturing animals.
Yeah.
Now, we don't know if Israel Keyes was a bedwetter, but we do know he liked starting fires and he tortured animals. So 2 out of 3 ain't bad, I guess, right?
I'm going to assume he was pissy when he slept.
At 15, he began building a cabin about a mile away from his parents' house. He finished the house at 16, and then he moved into it alone. He began stalking people in the woods. Now, this freaks me out.
Just like as a pastime.
Yep. He would see people hiking, and his favorite thing was to hide and watch them for hours at a time. They had no clue he was spying.
So he's basically practicing.
Yeah, like peeping and stalking and hunting, it
Jesus.
seems. He was obsessed with hunting at this point, always in the woods, always with a gun, always trying to shoot something. And he would describe seeing these people in the woods, and they wouldn't know that he was around, so he could hide and watch them for hours. And he really got a thrill out of this. From an early age, he fantasized about taking these people out without anybody knowing. He would always think to himself, I could shoot or kill this person and no one would ever know it was me.
Damn. That's some dark thoughts for a young person.
At 16, he was arrested for shoplifting. He got sentenced to community service. Jeff and Heidi forced him to move back home after this. When this happened, the family saw a big shift in his personality. He began withdrawing from religion. When Israel told his parents he no longer believed what they believed, Jeff disowned him, his own son.
That doesn't surprise me at all.
By 18, Israel had begun working construction and had started dating his boss's daughter. When his parents learned of this blossoming romance, they forbade him to see this girl. And I don't know why, but they were like, you can't see her. I don't know if it was because she wasn't part of their religious group or whatever. It just seems like they wanted to deny him any kind of happiness
Well, they've
or
been
normalcy.
Yeah, they've been sabotaging their own happiness, for all these years. So, yeah, they don't want to see him like blossom or, go a path they don't approve of. They're not going to allow that.
Well, Israel had very conflicted thoughts about sexuality because of religion. He wrote the girl letters and felt guilty every time he entertained any kind of thoughts about her. I mean, he's an 18-year-old kid, young man. Of course he's going to have sexual desires and thoughts and feelings. It's natural to have those.
Nope.
But he felt super conflicted because he'd been told, sex is a sin, premarital sex is wrong, you shouldn't feel those ways, masturbation's a sin, you'll burn in hell. So he's like super conflicted.
Man, I'm telling you, that seems to be one of the quicker ways to fuck a kid up is with this thing about sex and their own body, telling them they're dirty if they do this or they're wrong or that's, God's watching you 24/7. It's ominous. It's scary.
It is.
And I'm not saying you can't share a religion with a child, but when you use it as like this punishment and this fire and brimstone branch of it the entire time, that's just, you got to think, what are you doing to that poor kid who's developing their mental, abilities and stuff during all this?
Well, maybe I'm just like a super progressive kind of person. I mean, I know I probably am, but I've always been of the mindset of like, why would you, one, punish or scold a kid for self-exploration? I mean, it's their body. They're just trying to figure out how everything works and what it's for.
Ooh.
And it's natural. And like, I've never understood parents who want to punish their children. Like they catch them doing something and they're like, oh, that's a sin. Your body is dirty.
I'm exploring my body right now.
Oh, Lord.
Yeah,
Well, there's a lot of it to explore.
that's true.
Yeah, your body is a wonderland, Dylan.
Just found some itchies.
An extra, extra large wonderland. Okay, so by the end of 1996, the parents decided we got to move these kids again. And some of it was because they just didn't really like what Israel was doing. So they thought they could get him out of this town, away from this girl, and he might straighten up.
But he's 18 at this point?
Right.
Okay.
Well, his sister, Autumn Rose, was also rebelling. She denounced religion as well, and they all thought she was like in moral ruin. So we got to move these kids away from this area because it's corrupting our children.
And so they moved a lot all the
They
time,
did.
right?
Yeah. I
I think I'd read they moved at one point, maybe before, these longer times of staying in these other areas, they'd moved up to 17 times in a year.
yeah, that makes sense. And I didn't touch on a lot of that, but it seems like when they were younger, they did.
Yeah, so
Kick
that's just
around a lot.
no stability, no security, and that's not good for children either.
And never really knowing when your next meal was going to come because you were responsible for finding it.
Food insecurity. Is this in this country right now? Is this in this world? I don't think it should anywhere because it seems like we throw a lot of food out. But food insecurity is very, very worrisome because now these children have to have adult thoughts. Like, where's my next meal going to come from? What happens if we do this? Are we going to be able to, stay here? Is the rent going to be paid or what, And that's just stuff kids shouldn't have to think about.
Yeah. Well, Israel resented his parents when he had money and needed it for something, like he had a truck and he wanted to get new tires for the truck. His mom would tell him that the family needed the money more. And Heidi would give him these big guilt trips because she looked to Israel to act like a parent to these younger kids, which was like what her husband wasn't doing. So she looked to Israel to fill in for her husband and would guilt him about money. And he's out earning money and wants to do something with his money, as most people would want to do, and especially a young person. And she would just like have a cow about it.
Oh, that's so wrong.
Yeah, I mean, and who says it's his responsibility to take care of your children?
Well, it's not, and he's
He's
been
a kid.
filling a parental role. Who knows what age he started that? Probably rather young, and that's just not right.
I've never understood parents like that who expect teenagers to work and contribute when they're in school or whatever. I mean, I know some people are like, no, it's a good thing, but I've always been of the mindset that as long as they're a minor and they're living in your house, like they shouldn't have to be responsible for helping you pay bills.
No, you should be counting on your kids, but if they want to kick in and help or help you through, an emergency or something, there's nothing wrong with that. But
I would never expect them to.
No, I know some people might charge their kid rent or something like that, but then just be banking the money for them.
Well, yeah, but when they're like an adult, I don't see anything wrong with that.
Well, I mean, even younger, you could be teaching them a lesson about, hey, this is how you pay bills. But then you take the money and you put it to the side and then you give it to them, say, here's your money. I mean, there's nothing wrong with teaching lessons, but counting on it, like you can't make it without their income or insisting that they like give you all their money. No, I mean, that's just ridiculous.
Yeah, I'm not really okay with that.
No.
Well, the family moved to Maupin, Oregon. The family once again lived in tents as they built a house.
So they would literally get a little piece of land somewhere they could go squat, basically.
Yep.
And live basic as hell until they made like a lean-to or some kind of rough cabin.
Yes.
By actually cutting trees down by hand and dragging them around and making some kind of small structure.
Yes. We're talking like pioneer living in the 90s.
With all these damn kids.
With all these damn kids.
Would you do that?
Fuck no. One, I'm not going to have all them damn kids.
Okay.
My uterus is out of commission.
Right.
After 2, I was like, you need to snip that shit.
That was enough for you.
Yeah. I mean, because it's not like I wanted those 2.
No, so...
Just kidding. Or am I?
Not only... Damn. That's a hot take.
They know they're mommy's little happy accidents.
Yeah. I'm like, what's a planned pregnancy?
Yeah.
But no, I mean, so these kids, every time they go to move, they know they got to go through this, they're leaving this little cabin or lean-to or whatever, but they got to go through, start all over and start which I'm sure it's even rougher.
Back on the rough ass ground,
When you-
sleeping
yeah.
in a damp ass tent. Yep.
Damn, the pressures.
It's fucking miserable.
The pressures on this family, these kids especially, is it's really it's crazy.
In 1997, the Keys finally packed up for no real reason and moved to the East Coast for the first time to Malone, New York, where Jeff bought some property. This is interesting. He signed the deed over to his son Israel instead of keeping the property in his name. And I don't know if that was like for tax purposes or he thought maybe he could keep his son with the family because he could sense that Israel was like rebelling and maybe trying to do his own thing.
How's this dude Jeff run around buying property left and right when he's barely got any money? I need to reevaluate my finances and what I do with my money.
Well, I guess if that's all you're spending money on is a piece of property, Dylan, then we could just live in tents and we'd own a piece of property.
Well, that's true.
He signed the deed over to his son Israel, as I mentioned, and then a year later, in 1998, they moved again to Smyrna, Maine. They lived among the Amish, and honey was their main source of income. Israel saw his parents' actions as cult shopping, constantly trading in one harebrained religion for another. And those were his words. Now, he had a girlfriend in Colville, Washington still, that he had these unresolved feelings for, and he felt like the world was just on the cusp of this new millennium, but his parents are still trying to live like it's the 1800s. So he's like feeling very conflicted about this. Like he's got this girl, he misses her, he loves her, he wishes he could be with her. He's not happy with his parents. They keep moving around, joining these different religions.
Well, and that's interesting that he is so, his parents are so overbearing what they want and think has went and been the rule of the land that he goes with them. I thought he might buck up on him, when he has this girl in Colville, he's 18 and not, working. But no, he went with them and moved away, and then they're going to move again. And he just doesn't understand what they're looking for or what they're doing.
Well, he does not like living with the Amish in Maine at all. And since his father had willed him that piece of land in New York, and it had a bit of a makeshift cabin on it, Israel moved back there, and it was by the Canadian border. He took enough courses to finish his GED, and with a diploma in hand, he dedicated himself to a goal. He wanted to join the military. And how many times have we seen this situation where these serial killers decide they're going to join the military? It's like there's always seems to be some connection with, at least half of them go military, don't they?
Well, it's true, and they typically make great soldiers.
Exactly. In 1998, without a birth certificate or social security number, Israel Keys managed to talk his way into the U.S. Army. He was 20 years old without any kind of paper existence. So doesn't exist on paper in any way, shape, or form. But Uncle Sam's like, sign on the dotted line and raise your right hand.
Oh, well, it's going to get lost in the bureaucracy anyway, so why does it even matter?
Keys was surprisingly a good soldier, stationed at Fort Hood in Texas, then Fort Lewis in Washington, with a 6-month deployment in Egypt. He thrived under the structure that he never had growing up. His biggest challenge in the Army was making friends or relating to other soldiers his age. Keys had lived a very unusual life. He had never smoked, he never drank, and he had never tried drugs. He had no knowledge of pop culture. He knew nothing of sports or athletes. Israel Keys didn't know Brad Pitt from Tupac. So when meeting new people, he would explain his lack of information or, knowledge on these subjects by saying, I'm Amish. I grew up Amish.
Okay. I guess that was just easier than saying my dad and mom were kind of kooky and moved me all over the place.
But, I was like really thinking about this, and it's just such a simple thing I guess we take for granted. But imagine if you really had no exposure to any of those things. Like you didn't know anything about football, baseball, you didn't know who Burt Reynolds was, Nirvana, Frank Sinatra. It would be a strange world that you're entering in with no knowledge of this stuff.
Well, yeah, definitely.
Right?
Yeah, definitely. You just would be lost in just like normal, simple conversations people are having. You have no reference points, no idea who they're talking about or what they're talking about. But I wonder if you would be better off being that way.
Maybe in some ways.
Maybe your brain, you could spend your time thinking about other things.
Or you could turn out to be Israel Keys.
Or you could decide to kill people.
Well, he tried LSD and experimented with cocaine, which he really liked. In the first few weeks, he spent like hundreds of dollars a week buying cocaine, but then suddenly quit cold turkey because he didn't like feeling out of control. And that's another interesting thing about him, is that he can do something and then just quit it without any kind of assistance, help, intervention. Like, he's a very disciplined person.
Yeah, I think that's what that boils down to. I think that's why the army worked for him, and he can. It seems like he has to be disciplined to make it in his parents' crazy environment. You know what I mean? I mean, he has to all these responsibility and things he has to do to help them along.
Well, I don't like that feeling of being out of control either. So that's probably why I've never wanted to do drugs or have been into drugs, because I just don't like feeling out of control. I'm a bit of a control freak, and I don't like it.
Well, I didn't feel out of control on drugs. The only thing I've ever felt really out of control on is alcohol, honestly.
Like, I can never understand people who enjoy taking like pain types of pills, like opiates, opiates.
Right. Okay.
Because I don't like that feeling. Like, anytime I've ever had surgery and they give me like some sort of pain pill, if it just like knocks you out and you're just like, for like 3 days, I'm like, why would somebody want to feel like that all the time?
Well, I mean, everybody's different, but I know what you mean.
I don't like that. And he didn't like that. So, oh my God, am I Israel Keys? So drinking was more his speed. He felt alcohol relaxed him. He began drinking regularly, never feeling that he had a problem with booze because he could take breaks while he was in training. But he was like binge drinking, Dylan.
Oh, so just insane amounts of alcohol. When he did drink, he drank a lot.
Yep, there were times he got blackout drunk. And one time he landed himself a DUI, being stopped by the military police on base. While in the Army, he did start watching football with the guys. He was really trying to learn how to fit in a regular world, if that makes sense. He went to his first concert, which happened to be the Red Hot Chili Peppers. So during this time, he was still involved with his girlfriend, who lived in Colville, Washington. They both had remained virgins, at least that's what he was telling her. He was not sharing details of his new Army life with her, though they had become engaged while he was in the Army. Keys had started having sex with prostitutes and other women in the area. Keys would later admit or reveal that he was in fact bisexual, which was something that he had known about himself for basically, his whole life. But he just was really private about it. Like, he never came out until he was arrested.
No, he was coming in.
Okay.
Damn,
Dylan.
Okay. So he is not a virgin.
Nope. Not at this point.
But he's still telling his long distance girlfriend that we're both virgins. I'm a virgin still.
I'm saving myself to marry you.
We're going to get married. And then he shows up in a see-through muscle shirt with some Daisy Duke cutoff shorts to get married. Yes.
I hope so. That sounds fabulous.
Yeah, I know.
Or it sounds like you're referring to like the only gay in the village on the Little Britain show.
Oh my God, it's the best gay in the village.
With his fishnet shirt. I love that guy. So by 2000, Keys was still engaged, but he had met another woman online named Tammy. She was 10 years older and had a son from a previous relationship. Tammy lived on a reservation that was about 10 miles from Fort Lewis. At first, she wasn't really impressed with Israel. He was lanky with this like narrow face, not particularly good looking, and Tammy was pretty and voluptuous. She was half Native American and half black, while he looked like the skinny white nerd with wire-rimmed glasses. But they hit it off. I'm just imagining they were those, we call them BCGs, the birth control glasses that they issue you in the military. The ugliest glasses on the planet.
Oh, like those shooter glasses?
Oh, they're terrible. So unexpectedly, they had a lot in common. Like Israel, Tammy had grown up in poverty, living in squalid conditions on a reservation that often didn't have electricity or plumbing. She had been in and out of foster homes. By 17, she had attended AA meetings. They both liked heavy metal and horror movies. Tammy would later reveal that they had a passionate sexual relationship, saying that Israel Keys was the best sex she had ever had, hands down.
Okay. So, okay, so me and you got into a discussion about that.
Well, you brought it up.
I brought it up.
I don't know why, but you were like, Israel Keyes was a passionate lover.
No, I said he was purported to be a passionate lover.
That's what you said.
A very This is the way it was described in the other thing I listened to. Very giving, wants to please his partner lover. And I found it interesting that someone who was very narcissistic, a psychopath, all that, could do that. Put in that time and effort to make sure the other partner was pleased or whatever. And I'm like, why would they do that? Because they wouldn't care about the other person's feelings. And then, so I guess maybe, so they're seeking admiration for his narcissism. And so maybe that's what it is. So you can be like, oh, wow, that was great. You get all these accolades because you're such a great lover. Well, what was your hot take?
I said, well, maybe he wasn't really like a fantastic lover. Maybe he just had a big old dick.
Yeah, so this is her input on this conversation that I laid out for 30 minutes. That was your takeaway from that, right?
Yeah, and then you got mad at me because I
No.
suggested that he had a big dick.
No,
But I was like, well, he's tall and lanky.
I didn't get mad.
So maybe he just had a big dick and she was riding it like she stole it, which technically she was because he had a girlfriend.
And then I was like, so not all tall and lanky guys have big dicks.
And then I said, well, how many tall, lanky guys have you had sex with?
And I answered 0.
Right. So then I said, oh, so now you're a sexpert?
Right.
Yeah.
So you're basically telling me you fucked a bunch of tall, lanky guys with big dicks.
You see my baby daddies? I love the look on your face.
Let's move on with the story.
Okay.
You ruined me trying to dig into the mind of Israel Keyes by just saying he had a big dick.
Well, I just said maybe that she just had not experienced a big dick before, and so she thought he was an amazing lover because he's just, John Holmes.
Okay, I think we said
That was just my suggestion. I didn't mean to upset you.
I wasn't
Maybe
upset.
he was a passionate lover like you, Dylan.
And I don't care.
Maybe he was a man with a slow hand who really took his time.
And we said big dick too many times in a row there, so we can't say it again.
Big dick, big dick, big dick.
Now you're thinking about big dicks.
Always
Jesus.
thinking
Christ.
about you.
Moving on with the story. So he was known.
See, you get to derail the show by talking about your dick all the time. Why can't I talk about a big dick? Maybe I have a big dick.
God, you just keep
I have big dick energy.
BDE. Yeah, but I mean, so I think that he was able to and used to showing normal emotions.
Well, you're probably right. Like he was able to maybe train himself to copy other people.
I think that there's a version out there, like, the way Dexter's described, he's faking the entire time, like trying to pick up on social
He goes
cues.
through the motions of like being human.
Right. Intentionally tries to, appear normal. But I think there's some people out there, and Israel Keyes may be that person, who do have feelings and stuff, who does feel empathetic to other people in a certain way, but doesn't care that they do. You know what I mean? Minus the conscience. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I totally relate to that.
Okay. All right.
Because there's part of me that's very caring and sensitive and like really concerned about people and humanity. And then there's this other part of me that's like, I just hope that a big meteor hits us and we all die.
Okay.
So you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not a serial killer or anything.
So
Not yet.
back to the story.
Okay, so after 8 weeks of dating, Tammy called him up to say she was prego.
Yeah, she's like in traction with like them
She's like, I'm with child.
cold packs on her pubic area
What?
from getting destroyed by Israel and his freaking meat wagon.
Slow loving his smoke wagons
His meat wagon.
because he likes guns.
Oh yeah.
Okay, well, Israel suggested an abortion, which left Tammy feeling heartbroken. I mean, she really loved him at this point. Tammy told him, go ahead, move on with your life. I'm going to have this baby without you. Tammy had no idea that he was engaged to another woman back home in Colville and that was like part of the reason why he was almost like rejecting her.
Yeah, so she thinks it's puppy love and he's really just hanging out, doing whatever, and it's obviously not as important. Their relationship's not as important to him as it is to her, which is common. That happens. And not always just a woman. The man can be that way too. But anytime one person is like, views a relationship way different than the other person, That's sad. You know what I mean?
I've been in a relationship like that before.
Because all the chemicals and the feeling, which is what causes your feelings, is your chemicals in your brain, and it's so intense, right? When you're attracted or think you're in love, it's very, very intense feelings that you have inside, and it would really suck to be just outright rejected by the object of your supposed love.
Well, I've been in a situation like that, and it's not good. Like,
No.
someone liked me more than I liked them, and I almost, like, ended up in their relationship because they wore me down. You know what I mean? Like, they just hounded me, and, like, to the point that I would be so irritated. But it was, like, after a while, I was just, like, fine, because it was like I was never going to get rid of this person. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And then I end up in this relationship where I'm not really, like, I'm not happy, and they like me way more than I like them, but it's so hard to just get rid of them. And people will be like, oh, well, you could just cut ties. And it's like, not if this person just randomly shows up at your job and at your apartment and everywhere you are. Like, hey, love me, pet me. It's like, you're right. It's kind of really sad.
Oh my gosh, like the neighbor's cat you can't get rid of.
It totally was. God. Well, by spring, his fiance had felt something was not right with the relationship. And eventually he did come clean that he had slept with someone else and no longer believed in God. He didn't tell her about Tammy or the baby on the way. By now, Keyes had changed his mind about this abortion and saw Tammy as his chance at a normal life. As a matter of fact, he was actually looking forward to having a baby. He had raised his siblings, and he also saw the act of having a biracial child with this woman as a good rebellion, like against his parents.
Well, yeah, that's one thing I was hoping you'd bring that up, because his dad's it didn't outright say it, but he's racist. I mean, he's rubbing elbows with all these white supremacist people who race wars, blah, blah. So his dad thinks that way. And so here's Israel continuing to defy what his parents would like or think. And he's dating this girl who's half black and half Indian.
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely not white. And so now I think the more he's thought, I also think he's maybe hedging his bets right here with Tammy, and he's got the other girl in Colville. So if that gets screwed up, he's got this kind of built-in thing with her here, and now we're going to have a baby.
After Keyes got an honorable discharge from the Army, he moved to the reservation and got a job working in parks and recreation. He worked hard to fix up the house that he had moved in with Tammy, and he wanted to ensure that Tammy's son, Keaton, who's still a small child at this point, felt included. Like, he was very sensitive about this. He didn't want Keaton to think there's a new baby coming along. They love the new baby and not me. Like, Israel was really concerned that Keaton felt like he fit in and was part of the family and was loved. So that shows me that even though he's like a fucking psychopath,
yeah.
he has some feelings.
Right. And it seems to be genuine.
Yeah.
Because he really doesn't have to do that.
No.
Tammy's head over heels for him. He could be kind of an asshole about things and just be cold, and she's still probably going to stay with him, right? Got a baby on the way. But yeah, he's able to convey these genuine feelings and concern for people.
Keaton would come to love Israel and accept him as a father figure. Tammy found one thing about their relationship troubling was that Keyes began drinking a lot. Every night, he'd drink a 6-pack of beer, a bottle of wine, and then a 5th of Jim Beam.
Every night, according to her.
According to her.
That's a lot. That's like expensive to keep up with.
Yeah, right? And especially when you don't have a ton of money.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure Parks and Rec is probably a county or like a locally paid job.
Parks and
with
Rec
tax money.
on a reservation.
So probably not that much money, right?
Right.
Maybe just above minimum wage or something. Yeah. Well, he'd tell her how he was a bad person with a black heart when he was drunk and would cry and just be like, I don't deserve you. You don't know who I am. I'm really this terrible person. And she found that really confusing because she didn't know this other side of him. She summed it up that he was basically talking about like a traumatic childhood. Like, that's what she rationalized when he would get upset and start crying and be like, I'm a bad person. She thought it was just all those feelings from childhood coming out.
So that's what she gets to look forward to every evening, him getting wasted and depressed and sad and crying and talking about stuff that she doesn't even know about and carrying on and on.
Well, I don't think it was every night, but
Sometimes.
it was here and there.
Right.
Enough that it troubled her. So at some point, Israel branded himself with satanic imagery, burning an upside-down cross in his chest, and getting a pentagram tattoo on his neck. Now, for Israel, his parents were another topic that was off limits to Tammy. She had no desire to meet his family, especially after she had heard some phone calls between Israel and his mother Heidi, which were mostly his mother like reciting Old Testament scripture at her son, almost like she was shouting it at him. So Tammy was just like, cuckoo, cuckoo. I don't need to meet this, mother-in-law.
Yeah, I don't want to meet your parents.
And by this point, they've gotten married. Tammy was really stunned one night when they were watching a true crime show together. The story was about Shane and Chevy Kehoe. Now, Chevy Kehoe was accused of being an Oklahoma City bombing accomplice along with Timothy McVeigh. Chevy was convicted in a triple homicide of, so Chevy was convicted in a triple homicide of a Jewish family. And Israel was like, very casually, I know them, I grew up with them.
Yes, that's interesting. So they were neighbors at a time for a time, and you got these other family and kids who are crazy. So I think you could almost, we won't right now, but draw a correlation between extremist, fanatical beliefs and being raised up around that kind of wires you to do whatever you want because you can justify it with your beliefs.
Well, I'm forgiven.
Jesus.
Perhaps.
Well, I mean, what's the odds?
But also, I think when you're growing up in something like the Christian identity movement, or you're growing up around the KKK or some other extremist organization like that, is that they're basically cranking out terrorists. They're teaching you from a young age that you need to go out and fuck up the world.
Right. It's your right, or it's almost your
duty.
Your duty to go do these things.
Yeah.
And you do get to do whatever you want because you've already marginalized and demonized everyone else because they don't believe what you believe, blah, blah, blah.
Well, because Israel's parents had been involved in the same Christian identity movement as the Kehoes, of course, that is how he knew those folks. But he didn't want to talk about it any further. Like, he kind of just made light of it. I grew up with them, explained my parents were part of this church, and then that was it. He didn't want to talk any more about it. On October 31st of 2002, Israel and Tammy welcomed a baby girl into the world. Tammy insisted on a hospital birth. Israel, she said, changed when his daughter was born. So she noticed that once the daughter came, he softened up a lot. 2 weeks later, his father Jeff passed away while traveling from Maine to Indiana by train. He fell ill and never recovered. But the details on Jeff's death are very sketchy. It seems like they were on a train. He fell ill. They were like, you need to get him to a hospital, but he was against medicine. So there's not really a lot of information on whether they tried to get him treatment or they just let him die. It's just kind of weird and sketchy.
He said he didn't believe in hospitals. We'll see how much he believes in it now.
And some people would later question whether Keyes had been abused by his father, Jeff. He never spoke of his dad, but it was clear that his father had a huge impact on Israel and his life. And that there seemed to be almost like animosity between the two of them.
Yeah, I would guess there's some type of blame or, you could, if you hadn't have done this.
He has daddy issues.
Yes.
But he has mommy issues too.
Well, he has parent issues.
He just has issues. So their daughter had some medical issues. And at birth, that they finally were able to work out. And then Tammy was diagnosed with cancer fairly soon after her daughter was born. She began using opioids that were prescribed by the doctors. The relationship began fraying. Israel found himself being like a single dad. He was doing all the work with their new baby, maintaining the house, taking care of Keaton, while Tammy just checked out. She just laid in bed all the time, popping pills, just was kind of in her own world. And that's got to be tough.
Well, he could possibly feel let down by this. And granted, she's got a major medical issue and stuff. And I'm sure, who knows.
That's got to be tough.
Yeah.
For a couple to have to go through any kind of medical situation, especially cancer. It's frightening. There's that fear of the unknown. Is this person going to be okay? You've got a long road. If you do, do go into remission, recovery, it's a long road to get there. And then on top of it, your significant other is essentially becoming a prescription drug addict.
Right.
And you have a new baby in that. I mean, that's just a lot.
Yeah, but I can imagine someone like Israel coming from, dealing with his parents, feeling kind of like he's not getting support from her, or like it's all on him again.
And it was like uterine cancer, and I believe they wanted to do a full hysterectomy on Tammy. And she was also concerned because she was like 10 years older than him, that this would cause friction because she wouldn't be able to have more kids. Would Israel still want to be with her? So she had her own feelings. Well, in 2004, Israel took their daughter and moved into another house on the reservation away from Tammy because she was just worsening. In 2005, Keyes met a woman named Kimberly Anderson, who was a travel nurse, online. She was older than Keyes, financially successful, and eventually would ask him to move with her to Anchorage, Alaska. Tammy told him, "There is no way you can take our daughter out of state." And Israel said, "Okay, I'm going to Alaska to start over with Kimberly." And that was like the first time that Tammy had really seen Israel just become cold, like ice cold.
So he's like, fine, I'll just leave my daughter here with you, but I'm still leaving.
Yeah.
So I don't care what you say or think.
Yeah.
And I'm going to do what I want.
Exactly.
Okay.
And this was a man who was like a very doting father, and then just all of a sudden was like, "Fine, fuck it, you take her."
Yeah, and I'm sure that was a bit of a shock for her to having, him being this caring. She was almost like he's very caring because she's kind of leaning on him with her health issues and letting him take the lead with the child. And now he's just like, fuck it then.
Yeah.
And like, don't even bother him.
On March 1st of 2007, 29-year-old Israel Keyes moved to Alaska. Though he didn't actually settle in with Kimberly at that time, he spent 3 months traveling from Mexico to California. And no one really knows what he was up to at this time, other than he was in San Ysidro, San Diego, Anaheim, Oakland, just making appearances in all these cities, like up and down the West Coast. And going into Mexico.
So he's just floating around?
For 3 months. Okay. And knowing what we know about Keyes as we get on in the story, that's kind of scary thought because we don't know what he was doing.
Well, I'm sure it probably wasn't anything good. I mean, honestly.
Now, according to Keyes, and I'm going to be jumping around a little bit with our story, but I thought it would make more sense to do this, so bear with me. Now, according to Keyes, his first crime was a planned attack in Oregon in 97 or 98. He claims he abducted a teenage girl and raped her. He intended to murder the girl, but she talked him out of it, and he let her go. He would later tell investigators, "I wasn't violent enough. I made up my mind I was never going to let that happen again."
So after the fact, he was kind of mad at himself.
Yeah, I can't believe I wasn't violent enough.
Well, and that's common. When people start dialing up, they start with these crimes and keep escalating. And typically the first time they do actually kill, it's sloppy or, strange, or they almost get caught. But then they just, figure out how they want to do it.
So now we're going to move into, I wanted to touch on his life, give you guys a good view of who Israel Keyes was. Now we're going to get into some of the crimes that he may have committed. But some of these are kind of like a big question mark. Now, in 1996, a 12-year-old girl named Julie Harris went missing. She was a double amputee who wore prosthetic feet. Julie left home on March the 3rd and was never seen again. Now, at first, her mother's boyfriend was a suspect. Julie was reportedly last seen with a man in a trench coat. A month after she went missing, her prosthetic feet were found near the Colville River. Her body was found in 1997 by some kids who were playing in the woods. Then in June of 1997, another young girl went missing. Her name was Cassie Emerson. She was also 12 years old when she vanished. Her mother, Marlene, had perished in a trailer fire, and that's when it was discovered that Cassie was missing. When asked about both, Israel told investigators he often set fires. That was his answer. Instead of saying, yes, I did this, or no, I didn't, he just said, I often set fires.
Okay.
When Israel left for Oregon in 1997, there were no more child victims in the Colville area. So many believe that these 2 girls were his first victims.
And that very well could be.
He would never admit to murdering the girls, but he did say that his first act of arson he ever committed was burning down a trailer. So what do you think? Guilty? Not guilty? Possibly?
Well, the circumstantial evidence and what you learn about he went on to do, what he has admitted to, certainly makes it possible. If he's in the area, he could have been the killer. And then the fact that it stops and never happens in that area again when he leaves, I think that's very compelling evidence to the possibility he was the killer.
Okay, so I'm going to jump ahead a little bit, and we're going to work our way back to front, if that makes sense.
Oh, you want me to back that thing up? Mm-hmm. Juvenile said that.
So I'm going to jump ahead a little bit to February 1st of 2012. Israel Keys donned a ski mask at closing time and entered into the Common Grounds coffee kiosk after ordering a coffee. So he goes to the drive-thru, he orders the coffee, the barista hands him the coffee, and then next thing you know, he's got a gun, ski mask. 18-year-old Samantha Koenig was closing that evening. The young woman made the coffee, handed it over. That's when he pulls out a gun and demands that she hand over the money from the register. He then tied Samantha's hands with zip ties. He asked her, "Where's your car parked?" And she told him, "I don't have a car. I don't have a car here." So he forced her out of this coffee stand toward Tudor Road in Anchorage. While he was walking her away, Samantha attempted to run. So Keys chases her down, tackles her to the ground. He told her, "This ammo I have is really quiet, and if you don't cooperate with me, I can kill you right here."
Yeah, so he's a pretty physical guy, right?
Yeah.
He's in shape. He's pretty, not a small guy, not a monster, but he's a, pretty big guy. And so, it doesn't surprise me that he could easily, run you down.
Keys took her to the truck, which he had parked in a lot between an IHOP restaurant and a Dairy Queen. Israel had pre-planned this whole kidnapping by taking the mounted toolboxes off the bed of his truck, and he even removed the license plate on the truck. So he was planning this ahead. He forced Samantha into the truck where he bound her, and then they drove away. Now, Israel Keys drives this young woman, Samantha, around town saying, "I'm only kidnapping you for ransom." Now, Samantha is like, "Dude, my family doesn't have any money." But he was like, "Well, the public will raise money to fund this ransom demand."
Yeah, it's bullshit.
When he realized that she didn't have her cell phone, which had been part of his plan, he drives her back to the coffee kiosk to fetch her phone. When he gets the phone, he texts Samantha's boyfriend and the owner of the Common Grounds coffee stand to say that Samantha had had a bad day and was leaving town for the weekend. Then he takes the battery out of her phone. He asks Samantha for a debit card, and she tells him, "I share a bank account with my boyfriend, and my ATM card, my debit card, is actually in my truck, which is at my house." So she gives him the PIN number, and Israel Keys leaves her bound in a shed at his house, and he turns up the radio so nobody can hear her scream. He then tells her, "I've got a police scanner, and if you try to get help or you run or you go to a neighbor, I'll know and I'll kill you." He then, this is what's so crazy to me.
Don't tell me he's going to go break in her truck and get a damn ATM card.
Wow, we've got a winner.
Come on, dude.
Thank you for playing the Family Feud.
Who thinks like that?
So he drives to her fucking house to get this ATM card. Talk about balls, right? While he is at Samantha's house, digging around in this truck that she shares with her boyfriend runs out of the house and is like, "Who the fuck are you?" And chases him away. So Israel runs away, gets in his own truck, and then drives to an ATM immediately to test the PIN number that Samantha had given him for this card. And he realizes that it is the correct PIN number. So he takes the money out. Crazy.
Yeah, that is just the guts on him to do that.
Upon returning to the shed, he rapes Samantha twice, then asphyxiates her. He leaves her in the shed, goes outside, and just gets ready for a cruise that he's going to be taking from New Orleans. So he goes in the house, packs his bags, and the following morning, which is February 2nd, he departs for a cruise, leaving Samantha's dead body in his shed.
Damn. That's sick.
Samantha Koenig was a popular high school senior who was known to be quite responsible at work. So when her coworker arrives the following morning and discovers the kiosk in disarray, like none of the closing work completed from the night before, the employee was alarmed. Samantha resided in Anchorage with her single dad, James, and she did have a boyfriend named Dwayne that she'd been dating for about a year. Now, there was a panic button inside this kiosk, but at no point had Samantha hit the button. So they just weren't really sure, like, what had happened. Inside the coffee shop, there were no signs of a struggle. Samantha had been arguing via text with her boyfriend on the night that she'd been taken regarding her belief that he had been cheating with some other girl. But Samantha didn't have a lot of money, so the idea that she took off on her own, like for this weekend, was suspicious. Had Samantha left on her, of her own accord, when these temps were down probably in the 30s without a truck, snow on the ground?
Or her debit card.
February in Anchorage, Alaska? No debit card. And Anchorage, from what I understand, is not a walkable city. It didn't make sense to law enforcement that this young woman would just leave work and walk off.
Yeah, where's she going to go? How's she going to get there? It's cold out, and this is abnormal behavior for her. So it's just, I'm sure no one could understand. I'm sure people are already fearing the worst.
Well, police didn't even know that this Common Grounds coffee shop, this little kiosk, that it was a crime scene. Therefore, they didn't tape it off, and customers were in and out all morning, contaminating any evidence that may have been left behind. It is not until investigators get a copy of some security footage that was filmed in that parking lot near Common Grounds that they knew for sure that there had even been a crime. So in the video, they see Samantha serving a customer coffee, like at the window, and the next thing you see her hands go up, and then it takes about 2 minutes for this assailant to get inside, rob this young woman, and then snatch her from the coffee kiosk. So they can see this on security camera footage, and they're like, okay, now we know we have a crime.
They didn't start out with the damn footage?
No, I guess it took them a couple of days to get it.
Or
like 2
close
days.
the door
Yeah.
and say, we're not sure what's going on. We have a missing person. And I guess you can't fault them for that because they just didn't know.
And I don't necessarily know if this footage came from the coffee shop itself or if it was like some other business that had it that featured like you could see what was going on.
Well, that's true.
So I'm not 100% sure on that, Dylan.
So I'm sure they were not happy that, the crime scene was basically destroyed and didn't get any evidence back from that. I guess they simply didn't know it was more than a missing person at that point.
Right. Well, news travels fast through Anchorage, and on the 11th of February, a candlelight vigil is held with hundreds of people. People were wearing pictures of Samantha with a lime green ribbon, like tied, because that was her favorite color. James, her father, was at this event holding her 6-year-old pit bull Sheba and also wearing his daughter's picture over his heart. The national media became intrigued with this case of this missing girl in Alaska. Nancy Grace covered it, and then all the major news stations, ABC, NBC, CBS, and Fox, were all airing stories about Samantha Koenig. Investigators focused on what they could. Now, Samantha had not left the state as far as they could tell. They looked into airlines. There was no information that this young woman had made any reservations under her name, had traveled under her name. Samantha's cell phone hadn't been used since the night she went missing. If there was money taken from the register, they were like, well, it probably could have only been $200. So it wasn't very far for Samantha or her assailant, to get somewhere on this cash that he took. Some officers began feeling like maybe this entire thing was a plot that had been staged, by Samantha.
Oh, I'm going to act like somebody robbed me, but I really took off with somebody else.
Yeah,
or
that
something.
she like staged a kidnapping and that her assailant was just a man who was part of the plan. Rumors began circulating that her dad, James, was involved with the Russian mafia or owed money to the Hells Angels. People said Samantha sold drugs and was being held for ransom because she owed drug money. One woman said Samantha had stolen $5,000 from her father, James, just before the kidnapping, and that Samantha was heavily involved in meth.
Damn.
Now, the relationship between Samantha and her dad maybe wasn't rosy, and she was a girl who would do anything to get her father's attention. And there were multiple people who kind of painted that picture, that they didn't have a great relationship and that she was just really desperate for her dad's attention. And so it wouldn't be a big surprise if she had set this whole thing up. I mean, then of course this is rumor and this is coming from, people who knew her or whatever. James had set up a reward fund via social media, and it had reached over $60,000, like just in a matter of like a week. It was on February 24th at 6:57 p.m. that Samantha's phone came back online for the first time in 3 weeks. The text arriving in Dwayne's phone was very cryptic, and remember, Dwayne is her boyfriend. It just said, "Connor Park sign under pic of Albert. Ain't she pretty?" What a weird message, huh?
Damn, after weeks of not knowing where your girlfriend's at and you just get this strange message from her phone. That would be very disconcerting.
Connor's Bog Park was a popular trailhead for runners. Dwayne shared this text with the Anchorage PD, who found tacked under a bulletin board with a flyer for a missing dog named Albert, a Ziploc baggie. It was tacked to the board with a ransom note. There was a Xeroxed Polaroid of Samantha inside. Now, she appeared to have some sort of duct tape over her mouth and chin in this photograph. The ransom letter, demanded $3,000 be deposited into the account that Dwayne and Samantha shared. It also led investigators to believe that she had left Alaska, traveling in the lower 48. If demands were met, the letter said that Samantha could be free within 6 months.
6 months? What the hell?
Yeah, I know.
Well, this is very strange. I guess Israel's just getting his rocks off by messing with these people, by setting up this whole game. I'm actually surprised that he's interacting with her this long.
Are you?
Well, I guess that's his thing, though, right? Kind of torturous, messing with people.
Well, yeah, and he seems to think he's like the smartest guy in the room.
Well, there's that. Yeah, it's true.
Now investigators knew the case was officially a kidnapping, which was a federal crime. The ransom note was sent to the FBI lab at Quantico for examination. However, the big debate was whether Samantha was dead or alive in this photograph. Now, she appeared to be wearing eyeliner and her hair was braided, and they had noted that on the night she disappeared, like in the surveillance video, she had her hair down. So some people were like, well, yeah, but she's done her hair differently, so she's alive. And other people were like, I don't know. They even brought in an expert on snuff films, and that expert couldn't determine if the woman was alive.
Yeah, I mean, is she really trying to change her hairstyle while she's being captive by some monster? I mean, this might not be the time you braid your hair or decide to get bangs.
Investigators decided to keep her debit card active and deposit money into the account. It was the only way that they could trace the kidnapper's movements. Now, once investigators, I guess at one point, there was one investigator in particular who thought James, her father, was involved or was guilty. He had been spending reward money around town. Now, he claimed it was to keep his household going because he wasn't working while his daughter was gone, and, they were upset and whatever. But now James is reluctant to deposit this reward money into the checking account.
What the hell?
Yeah.
So he won't come off he doesn't want to use some of the reward money, over $60,000.
Right.
To, for whatever reason, to help investigators along in this case.
And police were like, this is not a good look.
Well, it's not.
And it made them kind of further think, okay, we think he's involved and that he did this for money, whatever. Well, again, there was a lot of talk about James, and they thought he was a drug dealer. A lot of people in town said he was. When they had a search warrant finally and went into the house to take a look, they found marijuana grow items and a lot of supplies related to growing marijuana. A family friend even placed concerns that James was obsessed with money and that was something police should be looking at. That even after his daughter had gone missing and he had placed this online plea for reward money donations, that he would check it multiple times in a day and would be like, I can't believe that people haven't given me more money than this. Almost like he thought he was going to get to keep it or something. So family friends were like, that's not normal, and told police.
No, you would think your main concern is your daughter, and where is she?
Right. But by now, we all know she's been taken by Israel Keys, obviously. Now, on February 29th, James said he would deposit $5,000 into the account on the advice of the FBI. They had told him not to put the whole $30,000 in the account, to just do $5,000 up front, and to let the kidnapper know, we'll do more later, kind of thing. So the debit card had been used around 3 a.m. after she was kidnapped on that first night, which would have been the early morning hours of February 2nd, but it hadn't been used since. Of course, she had less than $500 in this account at the time of her kidnapping. A few hours after they deposit the $5,000 in the account, police are able to watch in real time as someone tries to use the debit card in Anchorage. The person tried to take out $6,000, which far exceeded the ATM limit, but also the money that was in the account, because they only had about $5,500 in there.
Who in the hell thinks you can get thousands of dollars out of an ATM?
Well, that is another thing that law enforcement found interesting or noted. The amount of money, because they were like, who doesn't know that you can't take out thousands of dollars? And so their idea was well, maybe somebody who works a job that deals in cash money. And again, they kind of thought maybe her dad, because they're like, well, if he's a drug dealer dealing in cash money, maybe he doesn't have an ATM,
But in reality, it's Israel Keys who misses little things like that because of the way he was raised.
Exactly. So the attempt didn't go with the $6,000. But 2 hours later, there's another transaction where the person withdrew $500, and that was successful. So the cops are watching this. And at this point, they thought for sure Samantha was down in the lower 48, but they realized, no, she's here. Whoever has her is still here.
Right. So because they can tell what ATM was used.
Yeah. Then there were back-to-back withdrawals just before midnight. Surveillance from the ATM cameras were sent off to an analyst at the FBI who happened to zoom in and discover that the assailant's jacket had the word Corps on it, noting that either they were a Marine or they had possibly been a Marine. Because they're wearing this Marine Corps jacket.
Wow. That's a great observation.
Yeah, it was a really teeny tiny little insignia or insignia or whatever. Now, more evidence came forward. A security video of the Home Depot parking lot, which was across from that coffee kiosk. They noted a white Chevy that had no tag that sat outside for about 10 minutes, right? Then they saw a man exit that truck. Later, the man was seen on the video with Samantha. So now investigators know we have to find a white Chevy truck, which just happened to be one of the most popular trucks in Alaska. So not an easy job to narrow that down.
Yeah, it's like looking for a white van in the city.
It was on March the 7th that investigators got a surprise. Samantha's debit card was used in Wilcox, Arizona, nearly 4,000 miles away, and 6 days since the ATM card had been used last. Are you hanging out? Are you bearing with me?
Oh, yeah, I'm here.
I know it's long.
No, it's fine. I'm just trying to take it all in. And like a sex worker. And so he's on the move. Israel's on the move, and he's went a long way away from Anchorage. 4,000 miles. My God. I didn't realize Arizona was that far from Anchorage.
The next ping came a few hours later from New Mexico. So they could tell from still photos of the security footage, because it took them a little while to get the security camera video footage to Alaska. But in the meantime, they were just sending them still photos from the security footage. So they could see that this perpetrator was tall, very thin, and had to at least be 6 foot tall, 6 feet tall or taller. Another ping came in around 2:35 a.m., and that was just a balance inquiry. Now, the FBI field offices in Arizona were alerted, so now officers began patrolling the I-10 where it seemed that the perp was traveling, because we have him in Arizona, New Mexico, and it seems like he's driving along that I-10 corridor. A Texas Ranger who had seen that be on the lookout began tracking a white Ford Focus, which had been identified by the FBI as a possible rental or owned vehicle that was being used by the assailant. And I guess they concluded that from some of this ATM footage, that they happened to see this car in the background, but it was so, like, just a slight glimpse of this car. But the FBI profiler or analyst was, like, so good at his job that he was like, oh, I can tell from, like, this little piece of hood that I can see that that's a Ford Focus.
Oh, what the hell?
So they weren't 100% sure, but this analyst was like, I'm telling you, it's a Ford Focus.
And it's pulled right up to the ATM right behind them, like whoever's using the ATM right now, that's their car.
Yeah.
So possibly the assailant could be not a white pickup, but a Ford Focus.
So right off US 59 at a Quality Inn, a white Ford Focus was found. And this is in Texas. It's a rental car. So officers, including this Texas Ranger, follow the man. They're like staking him out. And he leaves. Eventually, they pull him over as he leaves the motel. Like, that was their plan. If he leaves, we're going to do like a traffic stop. So they pull him over and they're like, hey, you know, where are you from? What are you doing? All the basic questions that like cops would ask you if they pull you. Well, he tells them, I'm from Alaska. He says, I'm in town for my sister's wedding. When they're like, well, you're far from home. He's like, oh, I'm here, my sister's wedding. My name is Israel Keys. And then he begins offering up a lot of details, which the Texas Ranger, whose name was Rayburn, found as a sign that Keys was lying. Like, I've heard that a lot of times in law enforcement. If somebody's offering up way too many details, it's a lie.
Yeah, or they're spot on with it. They don't even have to think. Like, if you ask them what they did or where they've been, it's like they're ready. It's like they got their story ready.
Keys is sweating profusely. He's claiming he stayed in that hotel with his brothers the night before, that he had his daughter with him, that she was out in town with his brothers. And this guy's like, he's lying. He's sweating profusely. He starts like becoming combative. Like, am I under arrest or not?
Am I being detained?
Yeah. Well, finally, investigators realize this is like our now or never moment. So they quickly did a search of the vehicle and knew they had their man. Inside Israel Key's wallet was a driver's license belonging to Samantha Koenig.
Damn.
Now, under arrest, Keys is subsequently extradited back to Alaska, and that is where he confesses to Koenig's murder. Now, he admits that upon return from his cruise, which was around February 17th, so 2 weeks and a few days after he's killed this girl and left her in the damn shed, he comes back home.
Damn.
But I guess it's so damn cold, like, she was preserved.
Oh, yeah, I didn't even think about that. Yeah, that would work.
Yeah.
In Alaska.
Yeah, I mean, her body's, like, perfectly preserved. So he gets back. That's when he begins figuring out what he's going to say in this ransom note. He goes into the shed to retrieve Samantha's body. Now, this is very disturbing. He sewed her eyes open using fishing line. He applied some makeup, like eyeliner, and fixed her hair. And then he takes a Polaroid of her, and she's tied up, and he's sort of like holding her. And that was another thing when they were trying to determine whether she was dead or alive, is that you can see a man sort of like holding her up. But they were like, well, maybe he's just trying to be intimidating in the photo.
So she was dead in the picture.
She is dead in the picture.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did you see that picture?
Yeah.
Is it disturbing?
Yeah.
Or
I mean, to know she's dead, yeah, it's disturbing.
But if you didn't know she's dead?
Yeah, you'd be like, well...
You're not sure.
You're not sure.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. That's so sad.
So he takes this Polaroid of this poor girl. Then he photocopies this photograph to make it even harder to see that she's...
Not alive.
Not alive. And he uses a manual typewriter to type out the note. Now, in the following days, he dismembered Samantha's body and drove to Matitanooska Lake. I'm probably butchering that, where he cut a hole in the ice and then he put her body down the hole. Now, over the course of several months, once he's under arrest, Keyes points out to investigators that there are 3 other victims that he's murdered 3 other people. But investigators are not sure because based on some of his statements and some artwork that Keyes had been doodling, they think that it was more like 7 victims, maybe even 11.
Wow. So he's admitting to 4.
Yeah.
Okay.
So let's get into the previous murders, because I know we kind of skipped, but we're going to go back now. So investigators learned from Keyes that he meticulously planted kill kits across the United States.
This I found, for some reason, very disturbing. And, but given the type of person Israel is
crazy.
And the way he grew up, it's actually doesn't surprise me. And it's pretty smart from a killer's perspective.
Those caches included guns, ammo, zip ties, and other items that he would need in anticipation of committing a crime. Now, during hours of interviews, investigators learned that Keyes planned murders long ahead of time and took extraordinary steps to avoid detection. So, unlike most serial killers, Israel Keyes killed completely at random. He had no victim profile. His rules were to kill far from home and never twice in the same area.
Which is smart.
Very smart. On his murder trips, as he called them, he would keep his cell phone turned off and pay only with cash. He had no connection with any of the victims. Now, aside from Samantha Koenig, investigators learned of a double homicide that Keyes committed while in Vermont. And this is very disturbing. I know we keep using that word, but this is a horrific story.
Man, he's all over the country.
So on June 2nd of 2011, Israel Keyes flew from Anchorage, Alaska to Seattle, then down to Chicago. He rented a car with the plan of driving east. He wanted to visit his brothers in Maine, but along the way he stopped off in Indiana for a few days. He then went to that farmhouse that he owned in New York. And after that, he stopped off in Burlington, Vermont on the final leg of the trip. He knew he had a kill kit, if you will, buried in Vermont, so he went to dig up the items. He had taken a Home Depot, orange 15-gallon, almost like those paint buckets.
Yeah,
right?
The simple bucket with a lid on it.
And he'd filled it with all the supplies he would need to do crime. So after digging up his kill kit, he kicked around Burlington for a little while, walking around, scoping things out. It was around midnight that Israel Keyes found himself looking at a simple ranch house on 8 Colbert Street. He crept around the house. He found the phone line and cut it. The house didn't have any kind of alarm system that he could tell. He got a sense that an older couple lived there. There was an above-ground pool in the back and a barbecue grill area, but there were no kids' toys, no floats. There didn't seem to be any signs of a pet either. He was dressed in all black. Keyes admitted that he strapped on a headlamp and broke in through the attached garage. And that was part of the thing, too, is that he walked around looking for a house that had an open garage door or some way that he could easily access the house.
What's interesting is his crimes were of crimes of opportunity and random, his victims, yet the entire thing seems to be meticulously planned out. So he's just not acting on a whim, but when he sees the perfect opportunity or what he considers the good opportunity, he's ready to do his killing.
So first he enters into this garage where he rifles through the couple's green Saturn sedan, then made his way into the kitchen. Now he claims that this whole attack, which he described as like a blitz attack, took about 6 seconds. When Bill, age 50, and his wife, 55-year-old Lorraine, awaken to an intruder, it takes a moment for them to realize what is happening.
Right.
A tall masked man was really in their bedroom, looming over them with a gun. Israel forces them onto their stomachs, That's when he bounds their wrists with zip ties. And that's when he begins asking them, do you have guns? Do you have some prescription drugs? Do you have any cash? He grabs 2 suitcases from their closet and starts stuffing these suitcases with valuables. He then marches Bill and Lorraine Currier out of their home and into the garage, putting Lorraine in the front passenger seat, placing a bound Bill behind her in the back seat. Israel Keyes then drives the Saturn out of the garage. He told the couple, I'm kidnapping you for ransom.
Oh, here we go again.
It was around 4 a.m. when Israel Keyes arrives at an abandoned farmhouse off Route 15. Now, he had spent the earlier part of the day driving around, walking around for this exact purpose. He was looking for an empty house. And this is what he would often do, drive around looking for houses that seemed empty that were for sale.
So he can do whatever he wants in this like vacant property.
Yeah.
What a sicko.
He took Bill inside the empty house through a basement door and tied him to a stool. When he goes back outside, Lorraine was up out of the car, standing up, and she attempts to run toward the main road. But Keyes was able to grab her, drag her back to the house. He took her into a bedroom where he strapped her arms and legs to a bed with duct tape. Then he wrapped a rope around her neck and under the mattress,
Damn.
securing her to the bed.
Okay.
And Lorraine fights like hell the entire time. And Keyes says that. He's like, I'd never imagined this couple would be so much trouble.
So she knows that this is super bad and you should just continue to fight.
Yeah.
And I don't blame
And he
her.
says that. He says that she fought him like hell the entire time. Like every chance she got, she was hitting him, kicking him, biting him, spitting at him, like anything she could do to fight him.
Good for Lorraine.
I know. I'm like, you go, girl. Although it's very sad because it didn't quite work out. But Bill is now downstairs shouting, where is my wife?
My wife.
Shout for me, Dylan. Where is my wife?
Where is my wife?
Yes. And that's when Israel Keyes grabs his knife and a .40 caliber revolver and a water bottle. Yeah. And he goes down to the basement where he has left Bill. Well, Bill has been thrashing around and managed to loosen the ropes that were used to tie him up. Well, this really pisses off Israel Keyes. He told investigators, quote, I have a specific way that I want things done, and I have the whole thing planned out. I have everything I need to do it. So gathering from the conversation, investigators concluded that Keyes had plans to sexually assault Bill.
Really?
Involving something with this water bottle. So I don't know the whole story. And when they asked Keyes to talk about it, he would go, oh, I don't think I feel like talking about that right now.
Okay, yeah, I forgot he was bisexual, so he's going to assault anyone.
Well, now that his plans have been messed up, at least according, to him, because he's so controlling about everything, he grabs a shovel that's in the corner and he hits Bill with it. But Bill doesn't go down right away, and it took another whack for him to knock this man to the floor. So Keyes hears a thump, and he remembers that upstairs he had placed a propane stove on the bedroom floor. So I'm not sure if this is like a Coleman cook stove. That's kind of what it sounds like. One of those propane cook stoves.
Right.
We had put it on the floor, and somehow it had fallen through a hole because the house had some dry wood and dry rot types of issues.
Okay.
And I'll get into that. Like, this is definitely not a house someone's going to buy and move into.
Oh, so the abandoned house where he's took the couple.
Yeah, it's all like,
Okay.
like even worse than an Addams Family house or something. It's janky. So he's like, oh shit, the house is this dry wood. It's going to easily go up in flames if something happens with this propane stove. So he runs back upstairs to deal with that, thinking he's knocked Bill out here on the floor with a shovel. But again, Bill is back on his feet and yelling. So panic starts to set in because this plan that Keyes has come up with is spiraling wildly out of his control. He runs back down to the basement and begins firing the gun into Bill's arms, head, neck, and chest. However, Bill doesn't go down with those wounds. And Keyes is just like, what the fuck? He's like Jason, like, I can't kill him, right?
This couple, man, they have heart.
Well, then suddenly Bill falls to the ground, hits the floor. He's finally dead. In the bedroom, Keyes covers the windows and boils water on the stove, but he wouldn't go into like what he was doing with this boiling water. So I can only imagine what kind of horrific shit he was doing with it.
There's no telling.
Yeah.
He's sicko.
Every time they ask him, he's like, I just don't think I should talk about that right now. He cut off Lorraine's clothes with a knife and then proceeded to rape the poor woman 2 times. She's still fighting him as hard as she can, like the entire time. He then drags her to the basement, forcing her to sit on a bench where she has to stare directly at her husband lying in a bloody pool. She's fucking awful.
Yeah, well, I mean, this extended time he's spending with his victims yet again is, I think, says a lot about him. It's about control. It's about making them do whatever he wants. And it's torturous, and I think he gets off on that.
We're going to go ahead, Dylan, take another quick break, and we'll be right back. And we are back. Now, as I mentioned, Bill is lying in a pool of blood. There was a lot of blood, and Israel Keyes said he never intended for there to be so much blood. Like when he killed a victim, he didn't do it in a way that there would be a lot of blood or a lot of mess. Like he didn't want to deal with all that.
Right, and from a killer's perspective, that's smart. Because, I mean, it just says the mess, it's hard to hide. All kinds of evidence can be pulled out of the blood, spatter, fingerprints, shoe prints, palm prints. So, yeah.
So this is when he puts on leather batting gloves and strangles Lorraine from behind with a rope. So afterward, he put a zip tie around her neck and pulled again just to make sure that she was dead. She had fought him hard after all, and Keyes admitted that he was really surprised to have so much difficulty out of an older couple. That he was just like, this totally got Dylan style derailed. It did not go the way I thought it was going to go. At this point, he's just really frustrated and mad because he's like, I had plans.
Screw him.
I know.
And they fought for their damn life to the very end.
I'm glad they did. Fuck you, Israel Keyes. Well, he placed Lorraine next to Bill. He took off their restraints, and then he poured Drano over their hands and faces. He then bagged both their bodies in 55-gallon trash bags, and he rolled their bodies over to a corner in the basement. Then he piles some wood and garbage on top. He left all the shell casings on the floor because he was in such a rush. He had planned to burn the house down, but now it was like breaking dawn. Like the sun is up, people were out on Route 15, like heading into work. So he's really worried about the drawing attention if he burns the house down. But he's not too worried about the bodies because, as I said, the house wasn't in great shape. And he assumed that whoever bought this house was probably just going to tear it down and rebuild, and that they were really just buying it for this big chunk of property.
Okay, like they're never even going to walk through it one time. And
Well, he thought, as far as the smell goes, that people would likely think that some sort of wild animal had wandered in and died in the basement.
Yeah, well, I think he's being hopeful to a degree with some of this, but hell, he's a crazy killer. So,
Well, he collected most of his kill items and then drives the Saturn to a Rite Aid parking lot in town where he had left his rental car overnight. Now, he left the Saturn as far away from any surveillance cameras as he could. And then afterwards, Keyes hopped in his rental car and drove to Maine to hang out and visit with his family. Isn't that sweet?
yeah, I just had a little overnighter and I'm back.
Yeah, I know. It's fucking weird. The courier's remains were never found. The house had been torn down, and the bodies were unknowingly excavated and dumped in a local landfill.
Oh, shit. So his plan worked.
So if Israel Keyes had not confessed to this crime, it would be likely that this case would have remained forever unsolved. Like, nobody knew what happened. They just thought this couple, the couriers, had vanished overnight and were missing. So people didn't know if they're dead, they alive, they abandoned their life. Like, we don't know.
Damn, that's crazy.
But now we know. So the property where the farmhouse resides is now private property, but I thought this was pretty interesting, Dylan. There are a lot of people, of course, interested in dark tourism. I know we are, and folks drive by this piece of property daily to check it out.
Like
an Israel Keyes murder site.
Oh, where the couriers were killed?
Yeah. But the new owners will press charges, so if you are out and about and you're trying to find the spot and you want to go check it out, like, don't stop and walk up on the property because apparently they don't like anything to do with this case.
Well, and that's their right to that. They might not have even known it was a murder site when they bought the property. You know, some people is like, oh, you bought the Amityville house, and you shouldn't be surprised if people come by to take a picture. But, you know, sometimes people end up with these properties, and it's unbeknownst to them that it's connected to some famous anything.
Well, and especially if it's like a really old case.
Yeah.
You know?
And the house is gone, and the property's changed, and, yeah, I mean, they might have bought this, and after the fact, I wonder why people keep taking pictures of the empty lot next to where their house is actually built.
You know, I wonder nowadays, like, when people are working with realtors and they find a house, do they Google the address to see if, like, anything weird happened in the house before they buy it? Do you think that's, like, a thing now?
I'm sure it will be now that you started the trend.
Well, not all states are compelled to give up that information.
Right. Every state has different rules and regulations.
It does. Like, if there was a murder or a suicide in a house in North Carolina, like, the realtor's not obligated to tell you that.
I thought they had to here.
Nope, not here.
That doesn't surprise me.
But in
I
other
reckon.
states, they do.
Yeah, well, there was
But they don't have to disclose that information.
a family of 29 was killed here in the kitchen. But don't worry, the gas and fridge are in great shape. Right? Something like that.
I worked with a realtor, and she had a listing that was haunted, and I remember she was like, I always tell people, now this is a haunted house. And she said people would laugh at her and be like, oh, we don't believe in that. But she was like, you should. I guess this house had been a funeral home at some point.
Oh.
And she said in the basement there was still like this weird lift, I guess, that they used to move the caskets up and down.
Oh.
But it had like been sealed off, but you could kind of see like where it was or something. But she was like, you know, this house had been on the market forever. And she's like, it's totally haunted. I've had weird shit happen to me. But she's like, I would just tell them, like, this house is haunted. And she said most people would just blow her off or whatever. But that she did have people go, oh, I'm not going to buy this house then. But she was like, I just feel like I needed to tell them.
Well, I think that's the right thing to do.
She was kind of a fun, quirky bird. Well, Keyes told investigators that he targeted victims who crossed his path often, seeking out people in places like parks, cemeteries, or campgrounds. He wanted to hit places where there would be no witnesses. He had a history of traveling throughout the U.S. and into foreign countries like Mexico, Belize, Canada. Therefore, investigators believe there might be a trail of unknown victims. He planned his murders out carefully, crisscrossing the country to bury kill kits in various locations and then going back to dig them up like years later.
Damn, I guess the randomness and the kind of his rules he went by made it very hard for investigators to get, you know, they get a random murder somewhere, but then he goes, you know, 800,000 miles away to do his next one. You're not going to be like, wait a minute, we have a serial killer in the area. You know what I mean? You're not even going to think about those connections.
Keyes also revealed that he liked learning about serial killers and reading up about FBI profilers. He was particularly interested in Ted Bundy, who happened to lead a double life, much like Keyes. And that's what Keyes was so fascinated with, was the fact that, like, oh, I can go and live, like, this quote-unquote normal life with, like, a wife, child, participate in society, but then have this secret life that people don't know about.
Cool.
So I guess he's kind of like BTK or something.
Yeah, he's like, yeah, he is like BTK in a way.
When he was in Mexico, Keyes had himself fitted with a gastric band. So he went to Mexico to have surgery. And because he's a very tall, lanky guy, it's not like he had any weight issues. Some speculate that this was so he could become a better killer. If he could go longer without getting hungry or needing food, he could have more time for stalking and killing victims.
Yeah, I find, and you know, he was allegedly crossing to Mexico for multiple surgery trips. No one's quite sure exactly what he got done. Some speculate plastic surgery and stuff to change his appearance, but then others point out, hey, he basically looks the same as before and after.
Someone speculated that he had his fingerprints removed.
Yes, possibly his, this was all, what could it be by investigators, I think. But yeah, possibly he's altering his fingerprint surgically, which I'm not sure how that even works. And then you got the gastric bypass surgery, even though he doesn't have a weight issue, which I think that was a pretty smart.
I want gastric bypass.
If so, he's possibly biohacking his body to make himself a better killer,
which is just
next
crazy.
next level.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a ninja level.
Some of the victims Keyes claimed to have taken were 4 people in Washington state. He said he killed a couple sometime between 2001 2005, and that he had 2 other victims that he killed randomly in Washington sometime in 2005 and again in 2006. He also said that he murdered someone else on the East Coast in 2009, dumping the body in New York. And though Keyes didn't know the victim's name, the FBI believes he murdered a New Jersey woman named Deborah Feldman, who went missing in April of 2009. The 49-year-old woman went missing from her Hackensaw, New Jersey home. And if you do a quick Google search, you'll find little regarding Deborah's disappearance. There's only a small write-up on the Charlie Project website, and there's just a couple of news stories, but there's not a lot of details about her missing persons case. Other victims that may be tied to Keyes include the murders of 56-year-old Mary Cooper of Seattle and her 27-year-old daughter, Susanna Stodden, who were shot while hiking in 2006. The mother and daughter were on a quick 4-mile hike at Pinnacle Lake Trail. Now, initially, investigators looked at Mary's husband, David Stodden. However, he has since been cleared. It was a random murder and still remains unsolved, but investigators think this was the work of Keyes.
Damn. What the hell?
Keyes told investigators one of his dreams, because he did work as a contractor after he was out of the Army and moved to Alaska, that his dream was to build a house where he could imprison his victims.
Shit. You know, it wasn't that long after when he moved to Alaska at first. It hadn't been but just some years after they caught that guy who was literally hunting women.
Robert Hansen.
That he would take out with his plane into the bush and hunt them.
There's a movie, Frozen Ground, with John Cusack, if you've not seen that. But Robert Hansen.
That's right.
That's a very freaky story. It's one of those serial killer stories that's like haunted me since I first read about it.
Well, I think it's just what we've talked about before, the extended contact with the victim, the torturing them, giving them maybe this chance or hope of rescue or getting away, only to snatch it from them at the last minute. It's just, or you know, just like we talked about a couple of episodes ago, tying someone up and spending hours with them wondering if you're going to kill them, and then that moment when they realize that you are, they're not going to make it.
It's so sadistic.
It's very sadistic.
And there's something very frightening about being hunted as a human.
Yeah.
Like the most dangerous game. Like that story fucked me up as a child reading that.
Dude.
And of course, over the years, we've got like the Hunger Games, and we've got like a bunch of stories, Hostel, that kind of thing. And that just is really scary to me.
Well, I just think in this purest form version where you're led out into the woods and they untie you and they just look at you and they're like, run. And you're like, not even sure if, and they're like, no, really run. And like, boom, you're literally being hunted from that moment on.
And in the Alaskan wilderness?
Yeah, unfamiliar territory.
Fucking
shit.
Temperatures that are horrid.
By someone who is an avid hunter.
A maniac.
And has all the equipment and gear and know-how.
Scopes and infrared goggles and shit.
And able to, you know, look at your scat and tell where you are. Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tracker.
While in custody awaiting trial, Keyes gave hours of interviews to investigators, though he seemed to relish in keeping out certain details.
Yeah, see, he seems to do that over and over. Like, oh, I don't remember. I'm not ready to talk about that yet. And I think this just boils down to him playing some kind of mind games.
Totally. Well, again, he thinks he's like the smartest guy in the room. He also said he wanted a quick execution date without a lot of time behind bars. He didn't want his crimes to impact his mother or daughter. Now, on December 1st of 2012, while in an Anchorage jail cell, Israel Keyes took his own life. Though warned not to give Keyes razor blades, he somehow managed to get one, whether it was like from a guard or whatever. I'm not sure. I don't even think they know for sure. But he slit his wrists and then strangled himself with a bed sheet while he was lying in bed.
Okay.
Which is strange, right?
Good. He should have done that some years earlier and not killed anybody.
His body was not found until the following morning on December 2nd. A small funeral was held on December 8th, 2012, which was only attended by his mother, 4 sisters, and 3 of his brother-in-laws. Now, some of his interrogation recordings have since been made public. During his interviews, Keyes relayed that he was really two people. He said he felt like no one knew him at all. When asked why he killed those people, his reply was, why not?
There you
Now,
go.
the simple truth is, Israel Keyes enjoyed killing people. He got a thrill out of it, and that's why he killed, because he liked it.
Yeah, I mean, that's obvious. He put a lot of effort into it. You know what I mean? A lot of traveling around, setting up, hiding murder kits, stalking people, watching them. I mean, it's a damn full-time job.
While in custody, the only time investigators noted that Keyes seemed to have any kind of emotion was when he discussed his daughter. And he said, quote, "I want my kid to have a chance to grow up and not have all of this hanging over her head."
Yeah, and from all accounts that I saw, his daughter doesn't want to talk about him, doesn't want to be interviewed, doesn't want to be contacted on social media. She's just trying to move on with her life. And, you know, I'm sure she's not happy that her father was a damn serial killer and a monster.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely seems like Tammy's probably kept her maybe kind of away from all of that.
Well, and I think that gets to the, you know, it's fine for us to want to hear true crime and stuff. You know, some people get all pissy because the family members don't. Leave those people alone.
Well, I know that I follow BTK's daughter, Carrie, on Twitter.
Right.
And, you know, she gets all sorts of crazy messages from people who are like, hey, can you hook me up with your dad? Can you get your dad to write me a letter?
Yeah.
Just weird shit. And people like want to ask her on dates and stuff because of who her dad is.
Right.
But it's like they think of her as some like novelty or something.
That's disgusting. And Dennis Rader's daughter's actually been harassed online.
She has.
By people in his fan club, you know, people who actually are
because
local.
she doesn't have a relationship with him, and they're
No.
like stalking her and reporting back to her dad and then like harassing her on behalf of her father. I mean, it's just crazy.
I don't know if people do that just to, you know, think they're doing something or think it's funny, but that's a fucked up thing to do. And just trolling people hardcore online anyway, I think it proves you're a certain kind of person.
Yeah, I think so.
You know what I mean?
I mean, I troll people, but I would never like purposefully seek someone out. Like I just troll people who are stupid.
Well, it's one thing to get someone going over some dumb conversation or issue or just
Usually
to mess
just somebody
with
who
them.
says something dumb to me and then I troll them.
But it's another thing to do something to them that's actually going to bother them or, you know, disturb their daily life.
Yeah.
And that's fucked up.
No, I think we need to leave victims and their families alone as much as possible. I mean, I know that some families get really upset when their loved one's case is covered.
Right.
And that's a thing. But just to purposely like seek out this guy's daughter who's clearly trying to have some anonymity in the world, just leave her be.
Right.
Now, one of my main resources, probably the biggest resource I used for this case today, was a book by Maureen Callahan called American Predator, The Hunt for the Most Meticulous Serial Killer of the 21st Century. And then, of course, there is a ton of information out there on the internet. Since the story was fairly recent, 2012, of course, there's a lot of articles and news stories that you're able to find. Biography.com, that sort of thing. So if you want more information on Israel Keyes, read the book. It's very detailed and talks a lot about the investigation, but it's interesting.
And my resource for this episode was Heather. So thank you.
Well, you listen to a podcast, right?
Yeah, I
Didn't
listen
you tell
to-
me you listen to some podcast?
Well, actually, I did listen to a pretty good podcast, and I'll throw that out there since I did glean a little bit of my info off of that. And it was a decent show, Time Suck.
Okay.
So it's an interesting name, but it's pretty funny.
Well, you said you really like this podcast, so
He's-
maybe some of our listeners would like it as well.
Yeah, check out Time Suck. Don't know him. We're not getting paid to, but we here at Mountain Murders, we're not like some
We
podcasts.
share the love.
We're true crime fans, and so when we come across something, we know that some of you out there are like us. You need content constantly coming in, and so check out Time Suck. It was pretty cool.
Now, I started listening to the podcast that one of our patrons, Dustin, recommended. Is it called In the Red Clay?
Yes.
And you were saying, now you've listened to more than I have, and you were like, oh man, it's so good.
Yeah, I must say, Dustin, thank you for that. That recommendation. Andy, just so you know, I'm going to check out your personal podcast. I haven't done that yet. A little nerd culture in my life. Thank you for that. But yes, In the Red Clay, if you've ever heard or listened to our story on the Dixie Mafia or ever heard about the Dixie Mafia, it's very well done. It's got a lot of interviews and connections to the people who knew the people directly, friends, family of these Dixie Mafia members, and I find it fascinating. A lot about bootleg culture.
Gotta love that.
Yes, and so some of the things we love here at Mountain Murders, and some of y'all might like. And so check out In the Red Clay. Thank you, Dustin.
Yeah, so check that out. Again, our live show coming up September the 24th. We will have tickets available next week starting on Tuesday. I'll have a link up for that. We'll also have like a Facebook event and everything. Don't forget to find us with the Podbreed Network and, of course, radiofreeasheville.com. If you would like to become a patron, don't forget Mountain Murders Podcast is where you can do that. Patreon.com/Mountain Murders Podcast. And a lot of extra content there. You can get ad-free episodes in addition to the bonus content, and join our Discord chat. We have a growing family over there, and we have a lot of fun. We talk about true crime, but really we just talk about all sorts of shit.
We also talk about what we're going to make for dinner.
It's fun.
Yeah, so we talk about everything. We love them, and so yeah, we're really looking. We are really looking forward to our live show. So if you can, you're in the area, we'd love to see you. It's they're going to have a little, maybe possibly some live music after we do our thing.
Oh yeah, we'll have all sorts of details.
So just come have fun with us, and if you guys show up down there, you can smell me in person.
What?
Yeah. I'm offering that. That's my...
Are you going to bring in a cat from the winter that they can smell too? Like, you're so weird. I love you.
They can smell me.
I love you, big fucking weirdo.
In person. Yeah. I'm just going to have like a scratch and sniff sticker.
Drop us an email if you're feeling froggy, mountainmurderspodcast@gmail.com. And then, of course, you can always follow us on social media, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and we are on TikTok. And I'm trying to make more TikTok videos, Dylan. I'm gonna need your help.
Oh, shit.
All right, we're going to be going out of town. The next couple of days, we'll be on vacation, but we'll still be keeping you guys posted with memes and true crime news.
Yeah, if you're in the Savannah area and have some suggestions on great restaurants or where to get the coldest drink, let us know.
We're going to the Graveface Museum, and I will be posting photos. They have all kinds of Gacy paintings there. Lots of cool shit. So that is like my number one goal while we're in Savannah, is attending the Graveface Museum.
That's Savannah, Georgia, for those who don't know.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. And we hope you have a great rest of your week.
Peace out.